welcome to everybody joining the final Radical Talk focused on disability. They have been very popular sessions, so no doubt we will run them again. Radical Talks is going to have a little bit of a summer break, and we will be back in September with a Radical Talk focused on supporting people who've had contact with the criminal justice system. But for today, we're very much focused on disability. And I'm really, really excited to be speaking about conversations about disability. So Matt, who's our panelist, shared a report with me by Samsung that says almost half the nation feel uncomfortable about talking about disability in the workplace. And so if you feel uncomfortable about something, we often avoid it. And so today, we're not avoiding talking about it. We're absolutely going to talk about it. And we really, really want your engagement. So please do pop your questions in the chat. If you've got any questions, please do pop them in the chat. The lovely Lee is going to be facilitating the chat, and there will be an opportunity for us to focus on questions at the end of this session. This session is being recorded, folks, and it will be shared. We want lots of people to receive the information that we're going to be speaking about today. So please be advised that the session is being recorded and it will be shared. And we hope that it's going to be a really popular session. Please be respectful. All our panel have lived the experience of disability. And we've got Sabine, who's an employer today as well. So really excited to have everybody along. My name's Kirsty. I'm registered blind. I've got my camera off because I look very, very closely at the screen. And if I have my camera on, all you would see is my nose. So to avoid that, I'm keeping my camera off for today. So I think the best thing to do is to crack on and introduce our wonderful, wonderful panel. And I'd like to start, if I may, by asking Maria to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for having me here. I'm Maria Nicolette. Everyone just calls me Maria, so everyone just say Maria. It's okay. I'm currently, and I'm going to give a big woohoo because it took me years to get here, a civil servant in the Government Communications Service. I believe I'm allowed to say that I work at the National Crime Agency. It's amazing. And there's a lot of stuff that I could say with regards to what they are doing right in terms of disability inclusion.
Wonderful. Thanks, Maria. Matt, over to you.
Hi, I'm Matt. My pronouns are he, him. I'm currently a radical, but in the past I've provided disability inclusion support to people like Manpower, the Financial Times and Google. And I'm done speaking.
Thanks, Matt. Daniel, over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel. I met Kirsty on one of the workshops at my local town hall. I'm currently, I'm a new member to Radical. I'm currently volunteering at the Science Museum. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks, Daniel. You're very welcome. Jasira.
Hi, I'm Jasira Barrow. I used to be a radical, but I still believe I am a radical. I currently work at KLH Sustainability, and yeah, that's it.
Thanks.
You are still a radical.
I am.
Sabine, over to you. Sabine, are you there?
I think there's problems with Sabina's mic.
Oh no.
Oh,
Okay.
yes, Sabine, I think it's your audio settings. So next to the mute button, there's like
Yeah.
a drop down. Oh, you're back.
Is this better? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I just need
we
to,
got
I
you.
need to switch it. Great. Great. Okay, I can do it again now. I rehearsed. Yeah, so I'm Sabine. I work with Jazeera at KLH Sustainability. We are a small 10 people strong sustainability consultancy. And we've been working with Radical over the last couple of years, which has been really a wonderful and eye-opening experience. And we've been very happy with it. And with Jazeera.
Oh, we're so pleased you're on the call today, Sabine. Thank you. And Lee, by no means least.
Thank you. So I'm Lee. My pronouns are he, him. I'm one of the directors at Radical Recruit. For those of you who don't know Radical Recruit, maybe this is the first time you've attended one of our talks or had any exposure. Radical Recruit is on a mission to shake up the recruitment industry, to break down barriers preventing people that have any kind of disadvantage moving into the workplace and to secure jobs that they love. We're driving inclusion and we're advising organizations on how to really deliver in the D&I space. I'm really excited today to have such an amazing panel as well. So looking forward to this. This is going to be a really good session, I'm sure. And I will stick to the questions which will come towards the end.
Thanks, Lee. Well, that's our wonderful panel. Thank you so much to our panel for joining us today. I guess let's just get stuck in. This topic is really important to me. I worked in the sight loss sector for 20 years before joining Radical Recruit. And the statistics around employment for visually impaired people are around about 20%, 27% of blind and partially sighted people who of working age are in employment. That's not great, and that statistic has never changed or even got slightly worse over the 20 years that I worked in the sector. And since joining Radical, I realised it's not just visual impairment. You know, people with disabilities are not represented as they should be in the labour market. And I'm really passionate about creating that positive change so that disabled people are represented, they are supported, and they are included in the workplace, because it's so important. And I guess one of the ways, well, one of the barriers that I think we face, especially now we take into consideration the research from Samsung, is if people aren't talking about it, then how are we going to take a step forward? So we're going to ask the panel, and I think I'm going to come to you first, Matt. Why do you think it's difficult for employers to approach conversations about disability?
I think it's difficult for two reasons. I think the challenge that employers have is this experience of discomfort, because the word disability has so many negative connotations built into it, that employers, by sticking their head in the sand and not talking about it, they don't have to deal with the perceived pitfalls. I think that's one element. I think the other element is society as a whole has a very negative attitude around disability in general and what people with disabilities can and can't do. And I think when you have that, employers look at that perception of what society defined what people with disabilities can and can't do and look and say, oh, well, how are they going to do this job? I don't understand how they're going to do that job. Or if I was disabled, I wouldn't be able to do that job. So they automatically move to the default, oh, well, they can't do it, so why do we need to engage?
Yeah, good point. And do we think that employers generally have good intentions? So they'd like to employ more people with disabilities, but they're scared to ask the question about how that person can do the job. So are they scared to approach conversations like that, Maria, do you think?
I'm going to be careful when I answer that question because I've had bad experiences with toxic environments, so that didn't help. But I do believe on the whole, when you have it's a difficult question to answer because my experiences have been on the whole quite a bit negative, and I've written an article called "Now You See Me" as part of the a magazine that I was part of during that pandemic, which was my lifeline, and it's now closed down because they couldn't continue anymore. But I would like to believe, and I'm at the stage of my life right now that I strongly do feel this, that organizations, whether it's public sector or private sector, do have the intention, and there are people in those organizations that do have the personality that is really open to being really forward thinking and considerate of the fact that humanity is on a spectrum. I personally don't believe that disability or anything requires to be defined. To be fair, everything's on a spectrum. And I do believe employers are willing to have those conversations. Is whether you find the employers and are able to knock on their doors. And to be fair, one thing that I find that Radical Recruit does really well is knock on those doors and convince people to have the conversations, because at the end of the day, it's not only employers showing that they're coming and saying, oh, I want to show that I'm a genuine inclusion and diversity organization, so that the people who do have disabilities or any other characteristics can apply. That is the number one difficulty I had for finding a job, finding the organizations and sifting through the crap, basically. But also the ones that don't usually do that, don't usually consider it, how do we knock on their doors? And I think Radical have cracked it to a certain level and have found a way to knock on doors that usually they'd be like, okay, I don't know what to do with this. So that I think, yeah, the conversations are there, but there are different groups. The ones that are willing and genuinely coming forward, the ones that aren't thinking about it, but Radical go and knock on their doors. And I wish there were more people who could do that.
That's great. Thank you, Maria. Sabine, you were one of the employers who has been open to conversations. What's been your experience?
Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I think what often plays is an insecurity that either comes from a fear of saying the wrong things, but often also from this traditional idea that as an employer, you have to organize everything for your employees and you tell them this is how we do it. And this is really the other way around, because you have to first admit that you might not know anything about it. So that's saying, I have no knowledge to your employee, which is not always the position you want to come from. And then to ask them, how does it work for you? And you have to be quite vulnerable and modest in that approach. So it needs to break a little bit sometimes the traditional hierarchies in companies. And you need a bit of courage and also a bit of patience, because I think what we've noticed, so when Jazeera joined us, we were in a small office in central London with steep stairs going up. It was just before COVID started, and Jazeera was like, yeah, I can come up a couple of stairs, it will be all right. And we really quickly found out it's not all right. It's really difficult to get up those stairs. And then we were lucky we could move elsewhere with a lift. And it's like, okay, great, we've got a lift, job done. And it's not. It is so many things that are also involved with well, Jazeera's disability, smaller things that we didn't have any eye for. And so I think it's really important to also keep this conversation going. It's not just a conversation in the beginning, what can we do for you, and then it's over. It's like constant checking in. And I think we as a company are very aware that we still miss steps within that. So we're now, for instance, moving to another office again, has a great lift. And now 2 weeks before the move, we found out that actually there are a couple of things that are not so easy. And again, we've waited a bit too long having this conversation. So even with good intentions and wanting to, we still fall into this certain pitfall of thinking, it's probably all right, you know. So it's better to just ask the question to be sure and to talk about it. Can we just have 10 minutes to talk about what we're going to do? What are your concerns?
Sabine, like, it sounds like you've done everything right. So, like, your intentions were there, you asked the questions, and you also admit that you felt slightly vulnerable having these conversations because you know that you're not the expert, and that it's been a real learning experience for you as an employer, but you weren't afraid to take that journey with Jazeera. And I think actually, it's a learning experience for both the employee and the employer. And I think if you make that commitment together, to go forward. Jazeera, what was your experience on the other side of things as the employee? How did you find things, those conversations, approaching them, asking for help sometimes? How was that for you?
I don't know what the word help means. I think Sabine said it so well. I think you don't have just that initial conversation. When I started, I wanted the job so much, but I knew obviously I was very limited with what I could do in that office. And then being in that office for so long with able people, should I say, they didn't see any challenges or difficulties there. I'd done it for 2 weeks, and from the start, the director was very clear that if I was on board, they were going to move. And 2 weeks, then 2 weeks Christmas, then the pandemic, and then we moved the office straight away. So she was very willing to accommodate to my needs. I've been in organizations where I feel to meet my needs and help me with my condition has been me asking for a favor. If I need a better chair, it's already like, okay, we have to order a new chair, so you're gonna have to wait. So there's things that then not every company is willing to accommodate to your disability. A lot of them, they want to tick boxes. Yes, they have someone with a disability, or they have someone who's colored with a different background in their company, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to meet their needs and accommodate them at all. And at least in my organization, I can say that whenever I need something, I'm not afraid to ask. Doesn't mean that I ask for help, but at least whatever it is that I might need, and at times the team have thought things about me even having to ask for it. When we first moved into this office, we had all our plugs and cables underneath the table, and whenever you needed to put the charger in to charge, we had to bend under the chair and stuff. And I would have never asked for that to be changed, but I think they realized that to accommodate me, everything should be above waist level and should be easier. So small conversations and not feeling like you're intimidating or patronizing the person is very important. It's okay to say, I'm ignorant about this, teach me. And people will have a better understanding of what it is, because we don't know it as well. We don't know everything how we could be accommodated. So it's a two-way thing.
Yeah, brilliant.
I think this is why employee resource groups are so important for larger organizations, because that can be fed up to senior leadership coming from the people who actually need, and just saying, this is what we want. So the smaller ones, I think you have that opportunity just to sit and talk with.
That's right.
Leadership. Yeah.
Can I ask then, because Jazeera and Maria, you've kind of touched on this a little bit, but I understand, in your past, you've tried to have conversations with employers and it hasn't gone to plan. You haven't got the reaction you wanted or hoped for. And without naming and shaming, can I just ask how that made you feel?
Jazeera, do you want to start and I go after?
It doesn't make you feel like you belong. And no one wants to feel like they don't belong somewhere. We spend more time at work than we do at home. And every day when I go to work, I want to make sure that I feel included and people are there to accept me for who I am without me having to feel like I'm being a burden in the company. I think a lot of the times, companies don't know how to adapt to it, really. I'll leave it at that for now because I know we're going to touch on that a little bit later. So,
thanks. Maria, did you want to come in?
Since a child, because I was born with my disability, I've always had this tendency as a personality, for example, when there were bullies, to think, "Oh, you're an idiot, aren't you?" So I've always reflected it the other way around. I've felt bad about myself, and it's like, oh, how am I going to deal with this lifelong condition? What am I going to do? It feels bad to have it, but I feel bad because I've been unwell or something. When something happens because of someone else, an effect that is coming outside, not from my illness specifically, I feel that they are the problem. So my feeling, and I'm still dealing with it right now, even though I'm in an amazing organization, is trust. I don't trust at all anymore. I've lost trust in my political system that has allowed that to happen, that has allowed the two-tick scheme to go for 10 years and let me suffer through the two-tick scheme when I was a young graduate, and it did nothing for me. I lost trust with over a decade that I was trying to prove that I'm actually, really capable. I was believing that, I'm great at engaging. So why is it the words that are coming out of my mouth, you're not taking them on board and doing something about it? And I feel that although I agree with the barrier is that, employers mustn't be shy, I think there's fundamentally a structural and societal and organizational issue, which basically stems from how businesses work. So, for example, before the pandemic, I was asking, can I work from home because I was working 2.5 days, so that I can increase to 5 days a week, but do half the week from home so that I can do dialysis at home and I can still, and they said, that's not possible. And I said, why? And they said, it's a health and safety issue. And then the pandemic happened and everyone was working from home. So there is a fundamental structure that employment organizations have to start from scratch, and that costs money. And it's not easy. Like even my mum, who I love and adore, and she loves and adores me, obviously, she's my mum. She said to me, but Maria, I'm a manager in retail and I find it difficult. And what am I supposed to do when the business has objectives? This is my mum who brought me up. Yeah. And I was 35 when she said this. And now the pandemic has changed it to a certain way. So, yeah, I have to say that trust is a big issue, and also infuriated. I feel infuriated because I wish that 50 years ago, instead of having to create the Disability Act in 2010 that kind of makes people aware that we exist, I wish humanity would just say humanity is on a spectrum, and anyone can sit anywhere on that spectrum and everyone can be included. And when it comes to ability, there is a spectrum of ability, and we need to ask questions as a matter of fact sort of way, not as a I'm a bit scared, what should I do not to offend? A matter of fact, there is an ability spectrum. I want to employ you. You smash the interview, just like we say as radicals, we smash the interview. This is what we're going to offer you according to the requirements that you listed in your application. Great, done, dusted. But that's utopia. So I'd say trust and infuriation.
Yeah. Thank you for being so open and honest, Maria. I'm going to move over now to one of a kind of really hot topic, actually. I recently posted on LinkedIn, and it's something that I'm asked quite a lot. And you mentioned there, Maria, about this fear of offending. And one of the things that many employers have told me is, I don't know what terminology to use. There's all these kind of different terminologies that are out there to describe disability, one being uniquely abled. Now, I guess what I really want to hear from the panel is, how do those terms make you feel? Are they, do you think they're positive? Like, is it something that you would use to describe yourself? And I'd like to bring you in, Daniel, if I may, to answer that one.
Yes, it's a difficult one. Yeah, obviously it does matter. As a human being, we like to be called. I think they should also know how to use the terms when referring to a disabled person. Frank, they need to be, obviously, is it difficult? I mean, they need to be straightforward. I remember that many years ago, that terms in the past, they didn't know how to use, you know, they use different terms to refer when they refer to a disabled person. Nowadays, I think, you know, I believe they use better terms, but I still believe I still think they need to improve when they refer to a disabled person. Yeah.
Thanks, Daniel. Matt, what's your feeling on it?
My feeling is that when we look at language is such a fluidic idea, and I think it's why we're using that word. What's the intent behind the words as well? So switching, like you say, uniquely abled out instead of using the word disability. So why are you using that word, not the other word, as an example? And when we look at what that means and what we attach to words, that drives the conversation and the direction. I think that's nothing more evident than some research that Scope have dropped recently, which is one of the biggest around attitudes and stuff, where they found 3 out of 4 people with disabilities that responded to the survey said they'd encountered negative attitudes or experiences, and this survey was over 4,000 people. So it does indicate that language drives attitudes, which impacts on, for example, employment and perceptions of employment, and circling around again to whether people can or can't do. And we can go back to a bit of research that Scope have done last year, where they identified from talking to employers that 23% actively said they wouldn't employ someone with a disability, even knowing they would breach the Equality Act. So there's a real deep embedded issue around language and what language means.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people do get themselves tied up in knots with regards to language.
Can I
And
just add a little bit more there, Kirsty?
yeah, cool.
Yeah, I think sometimes, like you say, we get tied up with language and the intent of what our language is. And sometimes we get stuck in that area and then we forget to focus on what the actual outcome is, what the impact we want to be, whether that's positive or negative. Because we're so focused on, we've got caught in that fight or flight mechanism, or I don't want to say something, I don't want to offend. So if I don't say anything at all, then I can't offend. But by doing that, the impact you're having is offensive by not engaging.
Yeah.
Matt, can I ask, Matt, do you think if a candidate was presented to a recruiter as uniquely abled, instead of being presented as a disabled candidate, do you think that would actually make a difference?
Honestly, I don't think it would. I think the recruiters either got to be open-minded enough to accept people with disabilities or not. And the also challenge here, again, going back to a little bit of research that Scope did, they looked at this and they said one of the barriers they encountered was that recruiters and recruitment agencies perpetuated stereotypical behaviors and attitudes around what it is to be disabled. I think it's about changing the language to see, for example, the word disabled as not a negative word. Yep. Or maybe if we're going to switch to using a more positive language, then we move to things like maybe underrepresented individuals. So more positive shift to the words around it. And the same with the word, say, moving away from the word, and the same for applying that to when we talk about using the word minority, because minority, again, it's a word that has a lot of very negative connotations.
Yeah, I do find that it's such a difficult one to cover, because personally, if somebody called me uniquely abled, I find it cringy. Like it literally makes me cringe. And I'm, I don't want to be, and I'm sure that you've all been in these situations whereby, you've been out in public, you've asked someone for help and somebody shouted out, oh, I've got a disabled person here. And you sit there and you think, oh God. But I think personally, I much prefer that somebody says I'm a disabled person rather than I'm uniquely abled. Because
can I just have one little bit here? I think the other thing we have to take into account is when we talk about it, we talk about it very much from a Western perspective.
Right.
So I think sometimes maybe the words that we're comfortable with, maybe people from different parts of the world aren't in the reverse.
Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes when we have to think about that as a disabled person, we have to think about that in the opposite direction as well. I mean, like you, I'm perfectly much more comfortable with disabled because that's what it is. That's what I am.
Yeah.
Than use something that is essentially a marketing gimmick by using things like alternatively abled. But I know in places like Bahrain and the UAE, they use alternatively abled, and the people who are disabled, they see it as a positive. So see how cultural perspectives and the lens that we see it through culturally can impact. And what I say, I've always said when I've had this discussion with employers, and I can say this one openly, had this discussion with senior policy people with the Department for Transport several years ago, is when talking about language, reflect the language that the person is talking to you with. That's the best way to be on point, and I'll land it there.
Great advice, Matt. Yeah, absolutely. mirroring the language that person uses is always best. Thank you so much. I'm quite aware of time. Like, this conversation is so interesting. So thank you so much, panel. I am going to move on now, because what I want to focus on is how can employers create a level playing field for disabled people. So how can employers create environments where disabled people can feel comfortable approaching their boss, their line manager, the organisation themselves, and having conversations about disability and how that employer can make you feel included? Jasira, I'm going to come to you on that one.
That's an interesting one. I think your senior management or your manager or someone, they could have, because bear in mind, when you're in a company, you're with different people with different backgrounds and different mentalities and different ideas. So one person could make you feel super welcome and really accommodate you, and then you could have another 3 people that make you really feel like you are an alien within the company. So it's a bit tricky. I think everyone has to share the same value and not see you for someone with limitations. And that could be a bit, just to touch back on the question before that Matt was saying about using the word disability and feeling like they're treating you as if you are unable or incapable of doing something. My own family doesn't use the word disabled or disability with me. They don't know how to address my disability. And it was a word for years as well that I would hate if someone was to call me disabled, due to my childhood. And I think almost someone with a disability will always get bullied throughout their lives at some stage. So I think it's those words that kind of stays with you as well when you don't want to be living with a label. Also, what Matt said as well about in different countries, my family is African, but I was born in Portugal, and the word disabled in Portuguese is so hurtful. Basically, just showing you that you are. It's almost like the American way of saying crippled. You know, that's what you are. So they can't even, whenever they even use the word disabled with me, it's straight away like daggers. we're going at it with each other. But yeah, so thinking about it within a company, I think everyone just has to share the same values. Everyone has to feel like they want to really include you in the company and really accommodate your needs. And if you ask for help, or if you say that you're not feeling well, and you want some time off, or even as Maria was saying, you know, you want to work at home, so the company could accommodate you into it, accommodate that into your work. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Jasira, can I just quickly ask? So, on the 2 previous questions,
Yeah.
Who do you think is responsible for raising awareness? Do you think that is somebody living with a disability, or do you think that would be the employer to go and educate themselves?
Both.
Yeah.
Both, 100%. Me as a disabled person, due to the experiences that I've had before, I'm already walking into every situation defensive. You know, I've already got this wall up. We don't trust people. We don't have this thing where we're going to come in and just be like, oh my God, I'm so vulnerable. Because if we show vulnerability, we show a weakness. So we want to already come in there. We're strong. We've got this together. You know, you can't tell me what I can or can't do, despite us knowing that we have limitations and we can't do everything that someone else does. But that doesn't matter to us. The employer, I think as well, you need to go out there and try and see. But then it's all about communication. No matter what you learn outside in books or internet or whatever, you could only know what someone is living if you have conversations with them to actually have a better understanding of what their limitations are.
Yeah. And I think, you know, everybody is unique and everybody has their own set of needs. So you cannot just assume that if you've got a hearing impaired person employee, that if you employ another hearing impaired employer, that person will have exactly the same set of needs. No, it doesn't work like that. Everybody has their own set of needs. Sabine, you have worked with Jazeera, and you've implemented some reasonable adjustments. How easy was that for you as an employer to make those reasonable adjustments? Was it a fairly easy process? How did you find that process of making those adjustments?
It was very easy. It was really very easy. It's also, the difficulty is, I think, getting to understand what you need to change. And that's the conversations. But then the changes that needed to happen, they were really simple. They were actually small things, easy to do. You just have to know them. So it's not, and that's of course not all things that need to happen to accommodate space for people. But I think in a lot of instances, it is very easy and you can just do it. And I think, oh yeah, I also wanted to say something about the terminology. So you can possibly hear from my accent, I'm from Holland, which is a nice liberal country, but not so advanced on political correctness and terminology. And I've been in the UK for 12 years. Now when I get back, I'm a little bit shocked how people talk about other people. And I really actually value the respect in the UK thinking about terminology, whether or not you always do it correct, but just to think about it, to talk about it. And what I do, and what I also did before this, I Google what language should I use? And there is a really nice overview on Gov UK where they say, okay, these are the general terminologies. And then of course there's personal preferences. And then it's just for me to talk to Jazeera about it, and for Jazeera to say, oh, actually, when you say that, I don't really like it. And yeah, also what Maria was saying. So I think her story it's really painful to hear, and what she says about humanity needing to change and the way we organize businesses needs to change. I totally agree, and even the things that she's gone through are not by her choice and haven't been pleasurable. It also has given her values of, I think, courage and strength that are really valuable in a working environment. So sometimes also switching the narrative from talking about the disability towards talking the values that come with that, and just the skills and power that people have gained through going through those things, I think would also really benefit how we discuss it, and what we can, and how we can also let people be the best they can. So not say you need to do this because that's what we want, but how can you do it? What would you like to do? And have an open conversation about that.
Yeah.
Sabine, I was just going to ask, within your sort of network of employers, given that we've had Brexit, the pandemic, there's a shortage now of talent, and employers are having to explore this untapped talent that previously they would have overlooked. Do you find that within your networks, employers are generally now starting to have conversations about how they can be more inclusive and how they can make the workplace more accessible?
It depends. I think there's always people that will never want to talk about it, and they won't. I think in general, more exposure, more conversations will shift a lot of minds. And I think what happened also past when the Paralympics were happening here in London, there was, for me, such a personal shift in my approach towards disabilities, just because it was everywhere. Everybody was talking about it. We were enjoying the sports. We could see how fantastic it was, and get a better idea how to integrate people as part of daily life. So I think exposure is really important. We're on all levels, diversity is growing in attention and the benefits that we have from it. So yeah, we work in the built environment and construction, and we don't really want, let's say, middle-aged white men designing our spaces, because there's lots of different people using those. So it's for us in the workplace, it's more interesting, but also what we produce. So what we do as a company outwards.
Yeah, no, you do some great work, by the way, but yes, just with all intrusions. So
Thank you. Daniel, I'm aware that we haven't heard from you quite so much, so I'd like to come over to you before we go to questions. And I'd like to ask Daniel, how, for you personally, what would you want, or what environment would you want an employer to create that made you feel you could have open communication with that employer about your disability?
Yeah, it's a simple. I mean, based on my disability, is a visible one, obviously. So as soon as the employer can see me in a wheelchair with my disability, it's easy and straightforward. But still, what I experienced, for instance, recently, 3 weeks ago, in London Science Museum, I was the first person with a disability there. So I was very surprised because, you know, imagine, I was like, wow, Science Museum, the first person with disability. So I experienced from the very first day, the staff room, for instance, the room there, the lock where, you know, where you put the pin, it was far away from. So they say they're gonna, I mean, they need to, from the very beginning, they need to move everything, all the structure, everything. I mean, the lady who was still in, I was having the conversation, not like an interview, but he was, I mean, he was more open, like waiting for me to ask questions. She wasn't prepared. So so it's a difficult one because I'm not very I'm not scared of asking questions or telling the needs that I will have, but I guess they need to be prepared as well, because not every person with disabilities will have are quite open and tell their needs, which I am. I would like to also add something about word terminology, because I didn't add something that I want to say. For me personally, I don't want to somebody will say, you know, we have a disabled person. I think that when they because I'm already in a wheelchair, you know, I'm already is a visible one. So, you know, you can see that person is disabled. So for me personally, I think that we need to change that terminology personally. Yeah.
Okay, interesting stuff. And Daniel, I guess, so your experience there, where you were, you know, you were struggling with your locker, and you know that you had a line manager there, he just wasn't saying anything. Do you find that frustrating? Do you find that just, you know, you could, are you there thinking, you can see I'm struggling, why are you not approaching me to say, how can I help you? Or do you feel it's your responsibility to be saying, I need you to do something to help me here?
I was there to probably to give them. I mean, the ladies there, she said, you know, we're gonna change. We're planning. Because she said, probably it was an excuse when she said we were planning to make changes in the building, but obviously that wasn't the plan, because I was the first person with the disabilities there. So they mentioned that they're gonna make the changes. I'm still at the moment, every time I'm going there, I still it has to be someone there before. If I want to go to the staff room, I need to call that lady to open that door for me. So
and do you feel that takes away from your independence slightly?
Obviously, of course, because when I move in my wheelchair, you know, as a person in a wheelchair, and everywhere I go, you know, it has to be manual to me. I need to be. I always wanted to be independent. I drive. I do everything. But especially in the workplace, it has to be at least, you know, toilet and the staff room, your office, it has to be accessible. It has to be accessible.
Yeah. Great insight. Thank you, Daniel. Right. Lee, I'm hoping there's lots of wonderful questions in the chat. So I'm going to hand over to you to manage any questions that we've got.
I was just going to ask Daniel actually how long he's worked there, because sure, I can't believe that nobody's asked what adjustments they need to make. You not being able to access the staff room is just shocking. Like, how long is it that you've been there?
It's been 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Okay. 3 weeks. So I mean, as I said, when the lady, this, I mean, I don't know if the building has to be accessible beforehand, because probably they never realized that a person with disabilities and a wheelchair were going to apply that job, or you know that. Yeah. I guess so, but the skills were there. So you know that the building is old, yeah. So they never make any changes. But the lady said, you know, now we were planning to make any changes. So they're gonna change that all.
Good. I hope so.
Right, Lee, we've got about 5 minutes now for questions.
Yeah. We don't have many at the moment, but there is one question that somebody's asked around what do the panel think about access to work, the access to work scheme. So Maria, you're nodding, so I'll come to you first. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, okay. I'm just nodding because I know other people who've had experiences. So I've basically had a conversations with other people with disabilities because I'm really active. So my whole bubble around me is regarding disabilities, and a lady from what we call DNAG, which is the disability network at the NCA. I was put in contact with her, and she's got several health issues, and she said, oh, with access to work it's even worse now. And I said to her, explain that to me, because it hasn't affected me, so what are we talking about here? And she said, well, funding has been removed for certain things that are required, and now and I'm a civil servant, so I'm in the government now. Within the government, they're using government staff to do the equivalent work of what specialists at access to work do, because it's being moved. Now, a positive outcome that could happen is if there was enough funding for each department, like NCA, Home Office, whatever, going and employing, outsourcing access to work separately. But will they prioritize that? Will it be a priority in their funding to do that? And it does affect a lot of people. Like, for example, you know, I have multiple sclerosis. I need a car that is a specialist car that can get me to my job. If I can't get to work, then I'm going to lose my job. If I lose my job, you know, I don't know if any of you have watched it yet. I watched a preview on Wednesday. I went to see All of Us, which the comedian Francesca, I believe Martinez, did a wonderful show, and she was the lead actress in it. And it showed the fundamental issues of when access to work doesn't exist, funding doesn't exist, and all you need are specifics just to do your job, which are very simple, fundamental things.
I think, yeah, I mean, in a previous conversation about a previous radical talk, somebody described it as the employer giving you the tools that you need to do your job. It's as simple as that. So yeah, sorry, back over to you, Lee.
Sorry, I was just, I mean, we'll probably pick this up another time, Maria, but it's just curious why they would take that in-house when access to work is something that's paid for. So, but then they're going to incur a cost, bring it in-house and doing it themselves. But anyway, thank you for sharing that. It was really informative. We do have another question, which I'm just going to quickly come to now. There's lots of praise actually in the chat, by the way, saying how great you all are. So there's a question about shortlisting, which I'm just scrolling through to try to find again. So how do recruiters shortlist a list of candidates that apply for a role and disabilitied the candidates apply? Do we...
Lee, I think you're best placed to answer that one.
As I don't understand why you would, unless I don't, in the first instance, unless there was going to be I'm not sure I would even consider that in the first instance. I think that's the candidate should be considered on their merit. I'm wondering if, is it Vanessa who asked that question? If you could maybe just expand on it a little bit.
Yeah, surely I'm here.
Sorry, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Candidates with disabilities, and I put that in inverted commas because we are discussing that word, may feel scared, or they won't apply because, oh, they're not going to choose me over blah because I can't walk from one end to the office or whatever it might be. My point being, do recruiters need to look at the job roles and make them more inclusive to start with, so it warrants more people with a disability to apply in the first place, so they don't feel that they're not going to get it?
I think it's a good question, and I mean, our first thing at Radical we throw back is often when employers say, well, this person must come into the office, we ask why. Like, why do they need to be there? Because working from home is, often it's just, you know, expectation that people will come into the office and there's not really a need for it. And I know that a lot of people struggle with commuting and getting to work. So that's the first question, really, I think, to kind of throw back to the hiring community. But in terms of appealing to candidates who are disabled, then yeah, I think that's probably a bigger discussion that we've got left for with a minute, but definitely looking at that role profile and how to make it inclusive and going through with the hiring managers, because sometimes there's a wish list and there's not actually a real business need for that, for say something to be on there that's required. But actually, is it really required, or is the hiring managers just putting that on there, like the working from the office 3-4 days a week? So challenge it with the hiring community first, and then look at how you're going to take that role profile and advertise it, so you do get applications from people that are disabled, and also look at where you're advertising it as well, so it does reach people that will then want to apply.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Lee. Okay, folks, I am super sad that we need to end the conversation there, because we've had some great conversations today. I'd like to say a massive thank you to our incredible panel, Maria, Matt, Daniel, Jasira, Sabine and Lee. You've been amazing today. Your insights have absolutely wowed me, and I'm sure that you've wowed the audience too. A massive thank you to our audience who have joined today. I hope you enjoyed the session. I do feel like we should run more of these sessions focused on disability, because we always run out of time, and it's such a broad topic to cover. So we'll look to do some more perhaps towards the end of the year. Don't forget, Radical Talks is on a break. So we will be back on the 2nd of September with Crime and Stop the Punishment. And anybody who has registered for this session will receive the record as soon as we download it and distribute it. All that's left for me to say is thank you so much for joining us, and have the most wonderful weekend. Well done.